Buenas, dan hafade, manya luz and manya now. And donkulu nasitus masi ni manmatupaku. Welcome and thank you for being with us today to present resolution number 197-36 LS, relative to recognizing Irene Perez Ploke Sgambelluri as a CHamoru survivor of World War II, and for her tireless work as an advocate for Guåhan's war claims, and commending her for her dedication to ensuring that those who suffered and died during the war are forever remembered. I'd like to acknowledge the presence of my colleagues, Legislative Secretary or Acting Legislative Secretary Sabina Perez, Senator Tony Ada, Senator James Moylan, Minority Leader Senator Duenas, Senator Joanne Brown, Senator Mary Camacho Torres, Senator Frank Blas Jr., Senator Ridgell, and Senator Telo Taitague. Thank you, colleagues, for being here to help me present this resolution in honor of Mrs. Sgambelluri. And Saina Irene and family, Situs Masi for being here and with us today and allowing us the privilege of honoring you. My colleagues and dear people of Guam, the last of our greatest generation, Imenanata, who had endured and survived the Japanese occupation of our island, a great tidal wave of war that ravaged our shores for almost 3 years, beginning on December 8, 1941, to August 10, 1944. Many are being called to their eternal rest with each passing day. But until that final exhale, until that last burdened breath, they continue the hopeful march towards recognition, true justice, and healing. They carry on their backs the weight of their mothers and fathers, their brothers and sisters, who did not survive the perilous journey to rebuild their lives and to share their experiences and demands for justice and peace. With great courage, Imanyanata carry and raise the voices of our ancestors forward, reliving the trauma of war and loss through the sharing of painful memories and through advocacy so that justice can be achieved and dignity restored. Saina Irene Perez Ploke Sgambelluri has been one of our greatest leaders in the march towards justice for our people, joined by hundreds who advocated and submitted personal testimony to the Guam War Claims Commission and to Congress, including the late Senator Chilling Bamba, Beatrice Emsley, Tomas Barcinas, the late Speaker Ben Pangilinan, previous speakers and elected governors, Guam's congressional representatives, the late Antonio B. Wampat, the late Ben Blas, Robert Underwood, Madeline Berdalio, and current delegate Michael Sinicolas, and many longtime advocates of war claims owed to the people of Guam. Saina Irene Perez Ploke Sgambelluri has remained steadfast and undeterred, inspiring other elders, younger generations, and even the former President of the United States to march beside her. She's been a bridge across political waters and between Imanyanata and future generations so that we as descendants can never forget their great sacrifice and greater resiliency, so that we, the inheritors of a legacy of great pain but greater strength, take our place to carry them forward in the march towards justice and peace for all members of our greatest generation. Saina Irene Perez Ploke Sgambelluri, it is my honor and that of the 36th Guam Legislature and the people of Guam to present you with resolution number 197-36 LS, relative to recognizing Irene Perez Ploke Sgambelluri as a CHamoru survivor of World War II, and for her tireless work as an advocate for Guåhan's war claims, and commending her for her dedication to ensuring that those who suffered and died during the war are forever remembered. If I can ask my colleagues, please help me in presenting the resolution.
Buenas and half a day, everybody. I'm really honored to present this resolution 197-36 LS, sponsored by all senators, Speaker Therese M. Terlaje, Senators Telo T. Taitague, Senator Frank Blas Jr., Senator Amanda L. Shelton, Senator James C. Moylan, Vice Speaker Rose Muña Barnes, Senator Mary Camacho Torres, Senator V. Anthony Ada, Senator Christopher M. Duenas, Senator Sabina Flores Perez, Senator Jose Pedo Terlaje, Senator Joe S. Agustin, Senator Joanne Brown, Senator Clynton E. Ridgell, and Senator Telena Cruz Nelson, relative to recognizing Irene Perez Ploke Sgambelluri as a CHamoru survivor of World War II and for her tireless work as an advocate for Guåhan's war claims, and commending her for her dedication to ensuring that those who suffered and died during the war are forever remembered. Be it resolved by Imena 36 Nales, Turin Guåhan, whereas at the beginning of World War II, over 79 years ago, Irene Perez Ploke Sgambelluri was only 10 years old and living in Haget with her father, John Francis Ploke, a U.S. Navy pharmacist, her mother, Beatrice Taitague Perez Ploke, her 4 siblings, Danielle Ploke, Pauline Ploke Peterson, Genevieve Ploke Snow, and John Francis Ploke Jr. And whereas,
in a time when Auntie Irene should have been enjoying her childhood, instead, she was experiencing the horrors of war. At the start of the war, she and her family came close to losing their lives had her father not surrendered. Her father, however, selflessly surrendered, sparing the family, while attempting to comfort a sobbing Auntie Irene by clenching her hand. Her father was then sent to Zensuji prisoner of war camp in Osaka, Japan, where he spent the duration of the war providing medical care to fellow prisoners and journaling when prisoners entered the camp and when they perished. Auntie Irene did not think she would see her father again, and left behind, she spent the war foraging for food and enduring hard labor and beatings at the hand of Japanese. And
whereas in the aftermath of World War II, Irene fought tirelessly to keep the island's painful past alive through public speaking engagements and attending World War II remembrance ceremonies, to include serving as a guest speaker at the Meninga Memorial marking Guam's 68th Liberation Day, a Grand Marshal at Guam's 71st Liberation Day Grand Ceremony, a guest speaker at the Asan Landing Memorial Cemetery Ceremony, and laying a wreath at the Arlington Cemetery tomb of the unknown soldier in commemoration of the 74th year anniversary of the liberation of Guam and the Marianas, marking the first time in history that a civilian participated in the annual ceremony. Irene also served as a guest speaker at the Guam Museum's 75th Liberation Day Lecture Series and at the 76th Liberation Day Ceremony at the War in the Pacific National Historical Park, Asan Bay Overlook Memorial Wall. In addition to this, she has given dozens of media interviews and talks at various schools. And whereas,
Auntie Irene has fought tirelessly to make war reparations not just a local issue, but a national one. She has often stated that war reparations are not simply about monetary gain, but rather a vital step to ensuring that the suffering of the Guamanian people will not be buried with the past. And over the years, she has engaged in a multitude of conversations with local legislators to share these sentiments.
And whereas Irene's advocacy brought her to travel to Washington, D.C. in 2018, where she had the ear of one of President Donald J. Trump's top cabinet members, Mr. Douglas Holscher, Deputy Assistant to the President and the White House Director of Intergovernmental Affairs, developing a friendship with Mr. Holscher, with whom she engaged many correspondences and engaged in many phone conversations. She then educated members of the White House about Guam's unique past and the vital importance of war reparations.
And whereas Auntie Irene received the validation she had been praying for when she received a letter from President Trump recognizing the bravery of her military father, John Francis Ploke, and the Guamanian people. This would lead to President Trump signing H.R. 1365, which enabled the U.S. Treasury to correct prior technical errors of the Guam World War II Loyalty Recognition Act and releasing funding. And Mr. Holcher has publicly stated that Auntie Irene was the first person the White House contacted after the bill was signed into law. And President Trump then gifted Auntie Irene with the pen he used to sign that legislation. And
whereas, in addition to her political activism on both national and local fronts, Irene has also been known to assist war survivors in applying for war reparations. And her home phone has even served as a survivor's hotline, as local radio shows regularly give out Irene's phone number, as they are aware that she has always been willing to help her fellow war survivors. And
whereas Irene has often said that she has found peace and forgiveness through advocacy and testimony, and she's also found comfort in her supportive husband, the late Honorable Rafael Sgambelluri, former senator, her children, Darlene, Jennifer, Pamela, and Ralph, and her grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Today, at 90 years old, Irene's sole wish is that her story and the story of all those Guamanians who suffered and died during World War II will not be buried with the past. And
whereas it is the sense of legislature in Guåhan to acknowledge and celebrate those distinguished citizens of this great island. It is the custom of legislature in Guåhan to pay tribute to those individuals whose public service and civil contributions serve to improve the quality of life for Guam residents and attend to such concern, and in full accord with its long-standing traditions. It is the intent of legislature in Guåhan to commend and honor members of our community, such as Irene Perez Ploke Sgambelluri, whose diligent service has greatly contributed to the well-being of our community. And we extend much gratitude to her for her tireless work in advocating for war claims owed to Guam and ensuring that those who suffered and died as a result of the war are always remembered. Now, therefore, be it resolved that Imminent 36 na legislature in Guåhan does hereby, on behalf of the people of Guam, recognize Irene Perez Ploke Sgambelluri as a CHamoru survivor of World War II, and for her tireless work as an advocate for Guåhan's war claims, and commend her for ensuring that those who suffered and died during the war are forever remembered. And be it further resolved that the Speaker certify and the Legislative Secretary attest to the adoption hereof, and that copies of the same be thereafter transmitted to Irene Perez Ploke Sgambelluri, to the Honorable Joshua F. Tenorio y Segundo Magalahin Guåhan, and to the Honorable Lourdes A. Leon Guerrero y Magahagan Guåhan. Duly and regularly adopted by Imminent 36 na legislature in Guåhan on the 22nd day of October 2021, signed by the Speaker and the Acting Legislative Secretary. So my colleagues would join me on behalf of the people of Guam We're very honored to present you this resolution.
Thank you, too.
These resolutions are also stored on our archives so that future generations will know who we honored and that our values held them in high regard. I'd now like to invite Mrs. Sgambelluri to say some remarks.
I cannot find the words to thank the Speaker and all the senators of the 36th Guam legislature for this beautiful resolution. Thank you with all my heart, and God bless you. And I hope you like my testimony that I'm going to read today. Good afternoon, Speaker Terlaje and senators of the 36th Guam legislature. My name is Irene Perez Ploke Sgambelluri. I was born in Hagåtña in 1931. I am 90 years old. During World War II, I was a young girl in a time where I should have been playing and enjoying life surrounded by family and friends. Instead, my memories are of hardship and sacrifice. I am before you today, not because I am special, but because I happen to be a victim of circumstance. Over 77 years ago, our little island and people were ravaged by war. Since then, I have experienced many sleepless nights praying for the day when our country and the world would recognize our island's painful past. I, like many others, have fought hard to keep war reparations at the forefront. For many of us, it is not about the money or payout, but war reparation symbolizes that the suffering of the Romanian people has not and will not be buried with the past. There were times I feared we would never see this day, but every time I felt this hopelessness, I would force myself to get right back on my computer and my phone and write letter upon letter and make call upon call until just about anybody would listen. In 2018, my luck changed. I was invited by former Congresswoman Madeline Bordallo to lay a wreath at the Arlington Cemetery's Tomb of the Unknown Soldier in commemoration of the 74th anniversary of the liberation of Guam and Marianas. Present were many top military officials and many fellow Guamanians. In Washington, I had the privilege of meeting Mr. Douglas Horsler, Deputy Assistant to the President and Director of Intergovernmental Affairs at the White House offices. We talked and I brought war reparation to his attention. He and his staff so graciously listened to my experiences during World War II and offered to share my written testimony with President Donald Trump. When I returned home, I contacted Mr. Horsler, thanking him and asking him not to forget what we discussed. Honestly, I did not expect to ever hear from him again. But a few weeks later, my phone rang at 3 o'clock in the morning, and I answered it. And when I realized it was Mr. Horsler on the line, I nearly fell off my bed. That morning we talked, and I knew only good things were about to happen. Days later, I received a letter from the President Donald J. Trump, acknowledging he received my testimony in the following years. I corresponded regularly with Mr. Holzler, who often reassured me that the president would not forget us. He became a friend. At the beginning of 2020, war survivors saw some major progress. Our good Governor Lou Longuerero signed Bill 181 into law, providing for the payment of war reparations using local funds. In April of 2020, I received more positive news. I got the call I have been waiting for. Mr. Holzler called me to inform me I was the first person in Guam to receive information that the president signed H.R. 1365. The bill that would enable the War Claims Program to move forward and correct any prior technical errors. He also said the president will be gifting me the pen he used to sign the bill. And I got the pen in the mail. While war reparation is new of the present, it is important that I talk about the past and take you all back to 1941 to 1944, as this is the reason I stand before you today. While mine is but one story, I hope that by sharing my story, our island's painful past will not disappear with time. My story begins in 1941. My father, John Francis Ploke, was a pharmacist mate first class in the United States Navy. He was stationed in Agate, where we live and where he tended to people who needed of medical attention. My mother was Beatrice Duenas Perez Ploke. I was just 10 years old, and my three siblings, Danny, Polly, and baby sister Genevieve, were also very young. On Sunday morning, December 8, 1941, our lives were forever changed. I remember that day like it was yesterday. We were having breakfast when we heard planes flying over the island and saw the planes dropping what appeared to be black objects. Minutes later, my grandfather Atanasio Taitano Perez called to tell us that the United States and Japan were at war. Interesting fact, before the Japanese invaded, the United States military warned my family of a possible invasion and recommended we leave the island, but my mother refused. She wanted to remain with my grandparents as they were ailing. When the Japanese invaded Guam, my father had no choice but to hide in the jungle for days, until one day a Japanese interpreter and two Japanese soldiers came looking for him. They demanded his surrender and warned my mother, that if he does not surrender, then the consequences will be death for all of us. My mother had me search for my father. I walked deep into the thick jungle for what felt like hours. Once I found him, I said, "Daddy, Japanese soldiers are saying they will kill us all if you do not surrender." I remember that day like it was yesterday. I remember my father removing his shirt and tying it to a stick, holding my hand so tight as we walked to the jungle, and him surrendering. He was then tied, stripped of his clothing, dragged, and thrown in the back of a truck. I will never forget how scared I was that day. My father was imprisoned in Hagåtña in a building next to the Cathedral Basilica with other Americans. All those prisoners will suffer a fate far worse than we imagined. Days later, while taking coffee to him, we discovered that all the prisoners, including my father, were transferred to Sensuji Prisoner of War camp in Osaka, Japan. We never had a chance to say goodbye, and we were sure we would never see him again. With nowhere to go, we returned to Hagåtña and stayed at my grandfather's house, but we realized could not stay there because the Japanese ordered us to leave. They were going to use the house as their living quarters. We were lucky to find an abandoned house across the street. Food was scarce. We spent each day searching for food. Each day was about survival. Our clothes were made from cushion covers taken from rattan furniture, which my grandmother sewed. We made shoes out of wood and rubber tire straps. My siblings and I each had one good pair of shoes, which we cherished and wanted to save for a day all of us dreamt of, the day the Americans returned. Looking back, us children never lost hope. Interesting fact, by the end of the war, when the Americans liberated us, we all outgrew our shoes. We were forced to attend Japanese school. We had 4 CHamoru teachers and 1 Japanese teacher. The Japanese teacher was a soldier in the Navy and was very cruel. Because our father was in the United States Navy and we were fair-skinned, he treated my siblings and I differently. He would regularly slap my brother, and I pull my hair and drag me. We were treated harshly as compared to our classmates. In the morning before class, the students will face the sun and bow to the emperor, then exercise. We were ordered to participate in school performances at the plaza. When we were not in class, we worked in the fields under the hot sun and were deprived of food and water for hours. On rare occasion, the Japanese will allow us and other children to watch Japanese movies. I was 13 years old when the Americans made a dramatic return. I recall seeing American planes fly over Guåhan. We were overjoyed and so very relieved to see them. We also saw dogfights between American planes and Japanese planes, but we feared for our lives as the bombing began again. During the bombing, my family was separated. I recall running with some of my family in search of shelter. We ended up under the Hagåtña Bridge, where we cried and prayed for the bombing to stop. We were separated from my grandfather and cousin David Perez. The two hid in a Japanese bunker. During the bombing, both were wounded by American planes. My grandfather's eye was torn from its socket, and my cousin David was hit by shrapnel. The bombing continued and continued. Many homes and buildings were destroyed. The Susana Hospital was damaged, but during the confusion and terror, I will never forget, we encountered an unprecedented act of kindness. A Japanese corpsman offered to treat my grandfather's eye. He ran into the destroyed hospital, found medication, and treated my grandfather the best he could. He helped us and told us to run and hide. What an act of kindness. With all the bombings, we left Hagåtña by San Ramon Hill. Trucks packed with Japanese soldiers hollering, demanding that we get off the road. We found shelter and we're very lucky we did not get killed. With the bombing continuing, my mother told us in order to stay safe, when American planes get low enough, jump up and down and wave so they know you are American children. When we did this, we locked eyes with many pilots. This saved our lives. Japanese soldiers eventually came and forced us to join the many people walking southward. We were blessed to encounter help. During the walk, we met a family who saw that we needed help. We had our injured grandfather and cousin and baby sister. They offered to carry my grandfather and take care of us. They had food and a caravan. This was the family of Mr. Tomas and Mrs. Josefa Oka of Sinahanya. They were a godsend. We did not know where the Japanese were taking us. We walked for 2 days in heavy rain while Japanese soldiers stood by, and only at night we were able to rest on the side of the road. We finally reached an area near a river where the Japanese told us to stop. This camp was Manengon Jonya, a Japanese concentration camp. We crossed the river, and Mr. Oka found a place where he set up shelter for his family and ours. The camp was so crowded, we slept on the ground, sitting up. We bathed, washed clothes, and drank all from the same river. It was a miracle. Nobody got sick. Today, everybody gets sick from diabetes, cholesterol, heart, overweight, underweight. Everyone got sick. Every moment we prayed the rosary. The camp had little food. Mr. Oka rationed whatever food they brought and shared it with our family. I will always be grateful to the Oka family for looking after my family. Japanese guards surrounded and occupied the camp, and rumors spread that they were going to start killing people. I was sure our days were numbered. Days later, a miracle occurred. American soldiers came out from the jungle and had a fight out with the Japanese. Of course, the Americans won that fight and told us to follow them. The walk out of Manengon was very hard. We had to climb through the hills in the heavy rain and mud, and so many dead Japanese soldiers along the way. Night fell, and 3 American soldiers saw us, called my brother, sister, and myself to get into their foxhole, and covered us with their ponchos. With sunrise, we continued our walk, reaching the top of Mount Tingho. Soon, American soldiers showered us with candy. They told us to get in their trucks and took us to a staging area located at Pedo Cemetery. The Americans provided food and tents. We ate like we never eaten before. After 3 years of starvation, we all got sick. Funny thing, we did not get sick drinking from the river at Manengon, but we got sick overeating the rations. Shortly after we were liberated, my father came home all the way from Sensuji prisoner of war camp in Osaka, Japan. Seeing he survived and that he suffered greatly, my family and I were overcome with emotion. We hardly recognized him. He was skin and bones. It was like we were seeing a ghost. We were afraid to hug him, but of course, this wore off quickly. He was our beloved father. When my father returned, he brought back a black book, a diary during his time as a WOW. He kept a complete list of names of prisoners at the POW camp, their addresses, and the ones that died. I still cannot believe that the Japanese let him leave with his diary. I donated his diary to the Guåhan Museum as an exhibit to be available to the people of Guåhan for years to come. I have told this story many, many times, but I still find these memories agonizing, and I was one of the lucky ones to survive. I nearly lost my family, my home, and the life I knew. War is not kind, and although there were many wrongdoings and atrocities, we experienced acts of kindness and compassion. We experienced, with time, prayer, family support, and by sharing our stories, many survivors like me have moved on, forgiven, and found peace. I pray our stories live on and are never forgotten. Let us take a moment of silence to to honor the living and those no longer with us, whose suffering should never be forgotten. Siduus Maasi for giving me the chance to share my story. God bless you all. Thank you very, very much.
Situs Maasi Saina Irene, for your bravery, courage, and perseverance in continuing to seek justice for our people. Displayed outside in the lobby of the Guam legislature is Guam's wall of strength. Names never forgotten. The 15,891 courageous CHamoros who survived, died, or suffered during the war on Guam from December 8, 1941 to August 10, 1944. We will soon be making our way into the hall to pay tribute to all. It's been brought to my office's attention that this beautiful panel and the listing created by the Guam War Survivors Memorial Foundation, led by Senator Frank Blas Jr., is incomplete, and the listing at the Asan Bay Overlook Memorial Wall, Guam's only national monument dedicated to the sacrifices of Guam's Chamorro people during World War II, is also missing names. So I hope that my staff and I and all of our staffs will work with the Congressman and the Park Service to ensure that all World War II victims are listed for the record and that we do not miss a single one. Even those that were not eligible to file for war claims because of the U.S. Congress cutoff date of December 23, 2016. At the very least, we must include their names on the wall because they deserve to never be forgotten. And we will continue to remember all of them and continue to advocate for the right to war claims for all survivors of the war. I want to thank again Mrs. Sgambelluri and to the family. If we could pan the family with the camera, please. We have here the families of Darlene, Pamela, Ralph, and the family of Jennifer, who's passed away. They're all present with us here today. And to all those who are watching, thank you. Your support has made this day all the more special. And we will now, colleagues, proceed to the lobby and conclude our program with picture taking. Situs Maasi. Thank you.